heat in the U.S. Midwest and the negotiations regarding the grain corridor and its impact on the markets. Right here on Connected Farmer, your channel to keep you up to date with the latest trends in agriculture and livestock. So, Jerry, we had a lot of heat in the U.S. and the Midwest was no exception this week.
Oh yes, yes. Well, it come finally pushing out of the Southwest and got up in here. We had some mid 90s and above type situation here in Chicago. It's definitely a lot hotter just to the west of us here. You can get up into the Northern Plains where the spring wheat tour was going on. So it was definitely a hot one, and it looks like it's still pushing a little bit further east yet in the next couple days here. But we are having a chance for some more backdoor rain events to come over the top here and come through western Minnesota and Wisconsin. There's talking about that tonight. I'm not sure that's part of what prompted the values to be a defensive here. It was just the idea was a weekend and you never know what might happen. So combine the two together and it definitely pulled back from starting midweek here about what was going on for next week's price activity.
Yes, and we also saw no definition about the grain corridor.
Yes, yeah. Well, the Russians pulling out last week and starting to take some pretty significant military actions against various things. Odessa and other ports there where they had previously had some agreements about shipping things out of, and then with commentary from Ukraine that they were starting to look at maybe some of the western parts of their far southwestern areas of their country for some ship outs and maybe a potential export transfer near the mouth of the Danube. The Russians decided that, oh, well, we can always take our planes down that direction. So they did some pretty significant damage. One of them was really right across the border from Romania. That was quite an interesting excuse me, interesting issue there in Rena, a Ukrainian port on one of the on the end of the Danube. It kind of spreads out like it does on the U.S. Mississippi, where there's 2 or 3 different channels out of the end of the thing, and that was one of them. But anyway, the craziness is that the other thing that probably added to some of defensive natures here was the fact that the EU come up with this concept that the solidarity lanes situations and that for shipments of Ukrainian scenario, but at the same time, Poland and Slovenia and Hungary and all these countries are still not really in any idea about having any export shipments move through their particular countries. And also the EU is not really excited about covering some of the additional transport costs to say move grains to the Baltic type situation. And so if that's the case, then a lot to talk and a lot of well wishes, but how much real grain is going to be able to move that direction? So I think that also prompted some defensive tones here about that idea. But you would think that that would also continue to point to the issue that the Ukrainians at this point are not going to maybe have as many dollars being created from their exports of grain. And I think that's the whole purpose of what the Russians are trying to do here, is that they're trying to slow down any kind of dollars being created in Ukraine for exports and that would help boost their areas. And also, there's some commentaries flying around there about even some the idea that without the exports and that could significantly impact even the diets and things of that of Ukraine. I don't think we'll get to that point, but anyway, there's all kinds of commentary about this issue, and right now, at least, surprisingly, it hasn't provided any concern in the world markets here as much as you'd think. There was a pretty snappy reaction in wheat this week as we got past 60% here. I think we got up to just a smidgen under 70 at 67, 68% on the U.S. harvest, and that means we're in a post-harvest mentality, and I think that tried to be a positive there early in the week. But even without the corn and the soybeans following through, leading the way here on this whole tensions in the Black Sea, even the wheat prices slumped later in the week here as we kind of waited for next week's activity and what kind of impact this weather might have over the weekend.
Yes, and what do you think was the reason for the downward pressure that all the agricultural commodities suffered in the end of this week?
Well, that is, I've been scratching my head on that one too. Example that we ended up having all week, and why soybeans were relatively firm, but they really never did get explosive. We had various announcements on an ongoing basis here from started on Monday, and it totaled up. Even today, we ended up having a sale to China, a sale to Mexico, and a sale to unknown, which was 901,000 metric tons, which is virtually 1 metric ton, or excuse me, 901,000 tons of nearly 1 metric ton of beans, which is a sizable amount of soybeans to sell in one day. And the total for the week was 1.78 metric tons. And yet the soybean market seemed to shrug that off today. I was really kind of surprised by that. Part of it was we were defensive coming in here because of this rain activity forecasted for the Chicago area, but the problem is that it's kind of skirted the main producing areas here of Iowa and Illinois and Nebraska, and even the rain activities that maybe passes overnight into going eastbound, it's going to be northern Indiana and northern Ohio. It's not going to cover all that state area, and also the Delta this week is coming week going to stay very, very nasty with limited rains, just like a lot of the Nebraska and Kansas. So I was shaking my head a little bit today trying to come up with a reason why they were so defensive, other than the fact that it's a weekend. It's always unknown if the rain's more than expected, and there is some people talking about maybe 2 to 3 inch downpours coming through here tonight. But it's not the projection of where it's going to happen is really from Northwest Illinois, which did have some rain, by the way, yesterday in that, but we only had 4/10 here in Chicago and limited in Indiana, Ohio in that. And they're expecting it to maybe go on out into Fort Wayne area tomorrow in the same scenario. But I don't know. It's been a tough one. This time of year, though, we've got a lot of people that decide that they're on the vacation or they're not going to follow these weather markets and things like that. So the technical action in here, if it doesn't get immediate response about being positive, then people are exiting the side door pretty fast with stops below the market.
And next week, we will check the crops in central Illinois as we did last year, and we'll be able to project some yields out there.
Yes, it's going to be an interesting time to be out there. It's kind of surprising that there hasn't been more of that, but we didn't really get a big jump on plantings this spring. But we'll have lots of things to be able to judge with this warmth earlier in the year. from there. The interesting twist this week is that there was a U.S. spring wheat tour in North Dakota. It didn't have much coverage because they didn't really organize their various it's tweets, and I'm not sure what we call it here with the new name, out on the internet at this point. But overall, the yields were down 1 to 1.5 bushels from last year on their average for the tour. And that's going to be interesting because we didn't have a great yield on wheat last year. So that's one of the things we already know. But we're going to also find a lot of information out there. I think the one thing that I've been concerned about here is the fact that the heat we had in June and the dryness and the curling of the leaves, things like that, could have more of an impact. And it was early in the life of the corn and all that kind of stuff. And during some of the pollination periods here in the Midwest, we didn't have. We had a little rain, and we also didn't end up having the heat that we sometimes have in the past. But that's going to be an interesting situation. What our base statistics are going to have as we come out of those fields. So we basically leave Chicago and go down and make a kind of a circle around Bloomington, Illinois, which is McLean County, the biggest corn producing county in the state of Illinois. And so it's going to be an interesting time to be out there. And we'll have some more information to share with everybody on Sunday next week once we get back. So it's going to be an interesting week to see where things are at. And we'll also observe the soybeans. There's not much to be able to count there at that point, but we'll see what kind of height we got going. And also the one thing I'm going to definitely zero in on is the height of the corn. A lot of people made this mention here 3 or 4 weeks ago that the height of the corn wasn't as good as it could have been seasonally. That will be I don't know how much impact that has on the ear, but it definitely was something that was noted from the trade as before we got our July rains here in the Eastern Corn Belt. But we're all right. Next week's going to be a good one. Looking forward to seeing you there, Luis.
Yes, and once the video is up, we encourage everybody to comment to compare to what they are seeing in their own region.
Oh yes, yeah. To send us some updates what they're seeing out there, and that we'll of course I'll have some photos from the opportunity that I'll be posting too. If somebody wants that, be sure to have them send us an email, and we'll make sure they get on the list to see what our photos are of the various fields and things like that. It's going to be we've been doing this for various people for the last 10 or 12 years, and it isn't the whole country. It's only one area of Central Illinois, but it's a comparison of this area that I've seen for, as I said, for 10, 12, 13 years. I even saw it earlier than that, but it's been continuous since before the 2012 year. But let's kind of look forward to it, and we'll go from there.
All right, we'll see you in person then, Jerry. Thank you.
Sounds good.